Hey guys, this is Chris and welcome to the first lesson of the Mastering Excel series. So this is going to be a quick 10 video series where I kind of take you from, a very beginner level and help you guys become good Excel users. So that's going to kind of be the goal of this little mini series. And before we get started, I think it's just good on the first episode to just kind of talk about kind of what Excel is at a really high level and kind of some basic housekeeping things. So first off, what is Excel? It is a application. It's an application to manipulate, analyze, and present data in. And you might be asking yourself, why learn Excel? Why specifically should you use this course? Which are both good questions. And the answers are that Excel is used in pretty much every office out there. If you're working in some kind of non-technical role, so being, in sales, marketing, communications, anything like that, you're going to be using Excel more than likely. And that's why you really want to learn it, because you're probably going to have to use it. And when you're faster at Excel, it's going to help you get work done faster. It's going to help you impress bosses. It's going to help you limit mistakes. And it's just going to make you a better employee. And you're going to have a better experience in all. And then kind of next up, so why would you want to take this course? I think this course is going to be really different than a lot of other ones because we're going to take you from knowing very little. I'm going to explain a lot of details, and we're going to ultimately make you what I call a power user. And that's what makes this course different and why you should really participate in it and follow along, is because I'm going to be releasing these videos. We're going to go through, take you through the entire gamut, and at the end, you're going to feel very confident with your abilities in Excel if you follow along. So kind of with that out of the way, a quick little about me. So I'm a grad student. I have some pretty extensive experience doing financial modeling in Excel and other programs, and I have used Excel pretty much to the max of what it's capable of. And in addition to that, I've also used a lot of VBA, which is a programming language that comes with Excel, which we'll probably cover way towards the end of this series, if at all. It might be a separate series. And then I've also used a bit of C++ and Python, so I know my way around a spreadsheet. I can answer pretty much any question you have, and by the way, if you have questions, feel free to ask them below in the comments. I'll do my best to look through them, but I'm here ultimately as a resource to try to help you guys, become better Excel users. But anyways, yeah, so I have a pretty good understanding of all this stuff. So that being said, this is just kind of the quick overview of what this lesson covers. We're going to talk about the file. We're going to talk about kind of the Excel basics. Then after that, we're going to move on to the anatomy of a workbook. And then we're going to talk about kind of getting around Excel before we do some formatting and functions, some basic level for both of those. And then we're going to do some data entry, and we're going to move on to a final example. So without further ado, let's get going. What you've been seeing on the screen so far is what you will get when you first get into Excel. It is just the home screen. Here's kind of some basic options that you can use. And here we're in home. You can hit new if you want to make a new file. You can open to open an existing. And then you just have some options here. Now up top here is the blank workbook on the far left. This is usually when you open an Excel book, a file, or you want to make a new file, this is what it's going to be. Now these other things are tutorials, and one thing I want to mention is to get good at Excel, it's like anything else, you just have to do it. And these Excel tutorials that come with the program are very, very, very good. They're made by people who work for Microsoft. They can be great resources to teach yourself a lot about how Excel works, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to cover everything about Excel. And I'd really recommend checking it out, because if you go into some of these, they have templates, and you can go check out these templates, and they're very in-depth, they're very detailed, and they're a great resource. And they come with the application for free. That being said, we're going to go back to home. We're just going to go back to home. And two quick things I want to touch on is that I'm using Windows in this tutorial series, and I will do my best to let you know when something I'm doing is not something that you can do in Mac. That being said, Mac and Windows do have different versions of Excel. There's stuff that you can't do in Mac that you can do in Windows, and that's just part of using it on Mac. So if you're using it on Mac, just be aware of that sometimes I'm going to do things that you can't quite follow along with. Last thing is that there's a bunch of different old versions of Excel. I'm using 2016 with the 2019 stable release. That being said, I'm not going to cover things that you can't do in older versions. Every year they come out with new stuff, and a lot of times it's honestly kind of bells and whistles, stuff you don't really need. And the stuff we're going to cover is stuff that works in Excel all the way back to 1995. So if you see someone saying, oh, I can do this because of the new Excel, blah, blah, don't worry about it. It's stuff you can actually already do if you know how to do it, and I just wouldn't worry about it. So That being said, the only last thing I think worth noting is that, like I said earlier, I'm not going to be able to cover every single thing there is to know about Excel. And so as we kind of get through and build this framework of the stuff you need to know, you should just never be afraid to go and Google stuff and try to figure it out. Because once you kind of get the vocabulary of how things work, it's going to be really easy to look things up and use the internet, websites like Stack Overflow, stuff like that as a resource. So without further ado, I'm going to press this button, the back arrow up in the left-hand corner, and we're going to be in the file that I've set up. So now we're kind of in the anatomy of a workbook section. The first thing is this entire file is called a workbook. That's why up top, the name of the file is just book 1. Within a workbook, there's kind of two big parts. There's the spreadsheet, and then which is this area which has all the cells, and then there's the ribbon tab, or the ribbon keys. Up here in the ribbon keys, this is kind of a window browsing way to see all the functionality Excel has to offer. The people who make the program have gone ahead and they've taken all the things you can do and they've grouped them together. So for example, home has a lot of basic formatting things, so changing font size, stuff like that. And there's also insert, page layout, formulas, data review, view. Developer you won't have because you have to add it in. I just have it because I write code from time to time. But I'd really recommend taking some time to just explore these, because everything there is to do in Excel is in these tabs. And you can see that, like, insert, oh hey, you can insert picture, or you can insert shapes, pictures, graphs, charts, all these things, and they're all in these tabs. So if you ever don't know what to do, look around, ask yourself, which tab would it probably be in? Look around a little bit, and we'll cover all of them, but just keep that in mind that, like I said, I won't cover everything, and if you ever get curious, this is where everything is. So moving on to the sheets are kind of like the next lower unit of a workbook to the workbook file itself. So sheets are the actual spreadsheets, and within them they have a grid, and it's lettered columns and numbered rows. And basically it's like Battleship, where each cell you can store something in it, and it has a specific address. So this address is F6 because it's in the F column in the 6th row. Now, in addition to that, you can actually have multiple sheets. So if you go down here to the bottom left-hand corner and press this little plus button, you get another sheet. And it'll automatically be sheet number, and then it'll just be sheet something. Now, you won't have this practice one. That's because that's for the practice file, which we'll cover in the example at the end of the lesson. But you can go ahead, and if you ever feel like you need another worksheet, press new sheet. You can also go ahead and click on this with the left click on the title, and you can change the name of it. So I can name this like "This is my data" or something like that. And then if I don't need this worksheet, I can go ahead and right click it. Sorry, you need to name it first, so I'll just give it a name. You can right click it and hit delete. And now we're back to sheet 1. So now that we kind of have that taken care of, the last thing we're going to talk about is kind of the functionality of Excel. So like I said, they kind of have it all divided by the types of functionality. So there's home, which has a lot of formatting and all that kind of stuff. Now, the only other thing to note is when you're in the program, if you right-click on your mouse, or if you have a trackpad, right-clicking, however that's done, it'll bring up kind of this quick menu. And the quick menu is kind of the best hits of the formatting and functionality, where it gives you options to look at some stuff without having to go all the way into the ribbon keys. It doesn't have everything, but it has a lot of the good stuff, like changing the font size, inserting, deleting, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, you can right-click, or on Windows keyboards, and usually not for laptops but keyboards, the key that's 2 to the right of the spacebar, it's 1 to the right of the Alt. It kind of looks like a rectangle with 3 lines in it. If you press that, it also brings it up. And then, if you don't have either of those, you can press Shift and then F10, and it'll also bring up the kind of like mini functionality menu, the right-click menu. So, with that out of the way, now we can kind of talk about moving around in Excel. So, Excel is a spreadsheet and cell-based program, and a big part of Excel is moving around in the program, right? And when you're doing this, a lot of people will just go ahead and use the mouse, and that's okay, but there's a lot better ways to do it. But I'll just show that anyways. So if you want to click on a given cell, you just left-click on it, right? And then if you want to select a range and arrange just a bunch of cells, you click left and hold down with your mouse, and now you have a range, which is just a bunch of cells. Now, you can also do it with the keyboard, and I think the keyboard's a lot better, it's a lot quicker. I would recommend doing it because this is one of those things that makes you just a better user. So there's two ways to go up and down for each way. So there's four total kind of. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So I think the best way to move around is to use the arrow keys. And so if you go down, 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 that's how you go down. Left, 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 up, 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 right, right, right. So that's kind of just how you move around. But there's also the, with the arrow keys, that is. There's another way to do it where you can press enter and then to go down, and then if you want to go up, you press shift enter. So shift kind of reverses the movement that enter does. So again, enter is down, and then shift enter is up. And then if you want to move side to side, tab moves you right, and then shift tab moves you left. So those are kind of the two ways to get around, the two kind of sets of ways to get around. There's enter, 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 enter for down, shift enter for up, tab for right, shift tab for left. And then you can go down, right, up, down, or left. You can go any direction with the arrow keys. Now, since we can get around, the next thing you want to do in Excel is be able to select multiple cells, select a range using just the keyboard. So the way you do that is using either the enter and or tab keys or the arrow keys, or however you're going to do it. You hold down shift before you start, and when you hold down shift, and then in this example we'll go with the down arrow key, it actually selects a range. And then if you were to do it again with, say, the shift enter, oh wait, sorry, it doesn't work, sorry. So for this one you have to do the arrow key. So it's shift down, shift right, shift left. Now, with that kind of out of the way, the last thing to do is what's called fast moving. And fast moving is really important reason to use the keyboard. It's something you can't do with the mouse. So if you want to move in the mouse, you can scroll around with a scroll bar or drag down with the mouse, but it's kind of slow. Instead, what you can do is if you hold down Control and then press an arrow key, it takes you as far as you can go in that direction until as long as you're in the same kind of cell that you're in. And what I mean by that is if you're in an empty cell like I am now, it'll go to the farthest empty cell. And if you're in a cell that's full, it'll go to the farthest cell that's full. So for example, if I fill this up with 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and have a range here with ones, if I'm in it and I go Control up, of course I'm going to hit the top of the spreadsheet. But if I go Control down, it'll take me to the last cell that's full. So then you can move around really fast in the spreadsheet. So if I go Control down, it takes me to the bottom of the spreadsheet, which is about 1,000,000 rows, which would be really hard to do, pretty much impossible with the mouse. But you can also combine the shift and control and then use that to select massive ranges. So if you go shift control down, you just selected the entire F column, which is really hard to do any other way. The only other thing to talk about at this point, before we move on to formatting functions, is the difference between deleting and clearing in a Excel spreadsheet. Now, this is kind of a weird topic, but basically when you have cells that have stuff in them, you can either clear them, which keeps the cell but gets rid of what's in it, or you can delete it, which gets rid of the cell completely and shifts the entire spreadsheet over. So for example, if we go ahead and select this range by going shift control down and then right click, we can go and click delete to get rid of it. And then it's going to ask us how we want to move the cells because these cells are going, so something has to move in to fill its spot. So we'll go shift cells left. Now, because I want to undo that, I'm going to press Control Z. And what I'll do instead is I'm going to show what it's like to just clear contents. So I'll do the same thing, have G1 selected, then go shift control down. And then I'm going to right click and go to clear contents. Now, this is just an important thing to note because a lot of people do think that clearing contents and shifting and deleting are the same thing, but they're not. Deleting gets rid of the cell, and it's just something to keep in mind. So, with that out of the way, we're going to move on to formatting and functions. So, when it comes to formatting, pretty much everything you're going to want to use is going to be in the home button, in the home tab, sorry. So you have the font that you're using, the font size, and then bold, italic, underline. So these are very common. And for these, you can go Control B, Control I, Control U to change the font in a given cell, or change the text in a given cell, rather. But you can also change the color of the cell. So if you go to the cell and then you click this paint bucket, the little arrow next to it, you can choose, hey, I want to make the cell this color, or hey, I want to make the cell yellow, or whatever you want to do. And then you can go further and you can write something in it and say like, hey, and then you can go in and select this cell and then change the text color to say blue. Now this isn't really a great use of it, but the point more so is to just show you that you can change the cell color and the text color right here. And then if you want to change the alignment of a cell, you just make sure the cell is selected, and this works with ranges too, so you can select the entire range. but you just go and choose the alignment you want, and there's up and down alignment, and then there's side to side alignment. There's a lot more smaller things that you can cover in here, but because I don't want to get too bogged down in the details, we're going to kind of leave it at that. And there's also some stuff you can do with numbers, but we're going to cover that in a little bit when we get to a quick mini example and then the final example. Now, the last thing I want to cover before we talk about formulas is that you can change how big the cells are by selecting a row, and you do that and you can do it for column 2, but we're going to do it for row first. You go over to the far left, and you just click with the little arrow the number you want, and then you should get this kind of double arrow thing, and you can just take that to move the row you have bigger or smaller. And then you can make a bunch of rows the same size by clicking with your left click and then selecting a bunch of rows and then using the double arrow to change the size, and all the rows will change that size. So I'm going to press Control Z to get rid of that, but it's a really good functionality of Excel to use. You can also do it with columns, which I won't show here because we're going to do it a little bit later, but you get the idea that you can use the kind of axes up there, the letters and the numbers, to change how big cells are. So now moving on to functions. Basically, functions are just a way to take numbers and manipulate them a little bit. So we're just going to look at a really simple function where we're going to take the width and length of a rectangle and figure out the area. So first I'm going to go in here and delete this like I talked about earlier. So select the H column, then right click delete because we want to get rid of the cells, and now we have a blank worksheet again. So I'm going to type in here width and then hit tab and then go length and then hit tab and go area, and now I'm going to hit enter, and for the width I'm going to go 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, and we're going to go up to the length in H5 and we're going to go 4, enter, 3, enter, 2, enter, 1, enter. Now we want to find the area for each of these rectangles, and we can even number it and go here and type in rectangle. Oh, I misspelled it. Rectangle, and then enter, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 rectangles, and for each of these we want to figure out what the area is. And so calling back to elementary school geometry, it should be length times width, right? And while I could go in and figure out, okay, 1 by 4 is 4, we can also create a formula, and the formula takes existing cell or the values from existing cells, and then puts it into, and then takes those values and does something with it. So because it's width times length, we're going to make a formula, and the way you make a formula where you multiply these two. And the way you make a formula is you press enter, and then you select the cells you want to use. So you go width, and then we're going to press the asterisk, which is Shift 8 or Shift and then the 8 key, and then click H5, or H5. And so now we have a formula that is width times length. And now when you hit enter, you're going to get the answer, which is 4. But the great thing about Excel is that these cell references, that's what we're doing, we're referencing the data that's in a cell, are dynamic. So if you copy and paste this formula down, when you do that, it'll move with it. It'll calculate the area for each of the rectangles. And also, just so you know, you can check what the formula is for a given cell by selecting that cell and then pressing F2, and it'll show you where it's getting the values from. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and go Control C to copy, and then we're going to hold down Shift and then push down with the down arrow key and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and then go Control V. And now you'll see that if you press F2 again and hit enter, press F2, 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 enter, that it worked and we got the desired areas we want. And if you go through and check manually, these are correct. Now, one last thing you can do is, so you can go ahead and do what's called locking the cell references. So if we say, okay, well, we actually just want to see this width times these different lengths, we can lock the G5, and you do this by pressing F4. And what happens is when you see the $ in front of it, it means that that can't move. So if I were to now go and Control C, copy this cell, and then Control V, paste it down, you'll see that now if you F2 in these cells, the G5 is not moving. And then right now, this is both the G5, if you F2 over the cell again, is locked in both the row and column directions. And if you go and select the G5 and you press F4 again, you can lock it. Now it's locked only in the row. So if you move side to side, it'll reflect that. So if you move to the right one, it'll be H5 times I5. And then if you do it again, now you've locked it in the column, so it can't move through G, but it can move up and down. And then if you press F4 again, you're back to the way it was. So we'll really quickly cover the how you format numbers. And the way you do it is pretty similar to how you format text. What you do is you just select the range that you want, or the cell, or however much data you want to mess with, and we're going to do all of the area. So we'll go shift down, 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 and you're going to go over here to the number section. What you can do is you can go through and kind of look at the different types of number formats there are. So we're going to start out with just general number, and you'll notice now that we have points past, we have zeros beyond the decimal point, which we didn't have before. And you can actually add or remove them by going up to these buttons, the increase decimal and remove decimal or decrease decimal. And by pressing this, you can add or remove points past the decimal spot. And this can be really important because say we have 2.5, if I remove decimal points, it's going to round. But if I add them, you can see what the value actually is. And I'm going to get rid of that, but you can see that there's actually a lot of accuracy that you can gain or lose by using that. Now I'm going to go ahead and shift down, down, down again, so we have the area column selected, and you can actually change it as well to occurrence or accounting, and then currency, percentage, and I really recommend just going in and playing with all these different number formats, because like I said, I can't cover everything there is to know about them, but these are kind of the big basic number formats. So that being said, we can now kind of move on to the data entry exercise I want to cover. And then finally, we're going to go on to the example, which the file will be included in the description below. So just for some practice, you can select this entire area and get rid of it by holding down Shift, holding down Control, and then pressing the right arrow and the down arrow. Oh, sorry. And now that you have the entire area selected, you're going to right click and go to Delete. And it's going to ask you where you want to move. Right now it doesn't matter, but you could also clear it, but we're going to delete it and just let it go. So let's pretend that we're going to make a really small address book. The way this is going to work is we're going to have the name of the person, so name and then tab, and then address, and then tab, and then country, and then tab. So we're going to go ahead and do some data entry. So you go over and select below the name, and let's make our first friend is going to be Bob, and we'll hit tab, and his address is 123 Street, and then we're going to hit tab, and then the country he lives in is USA, and then we're going to hit enter. Next we're going to do Sally, so S-A-L-L-Y, tab, and then her street is 456 Road, and then we're going to hit tab, and then we're going to go USA again, and we're going to hit enter. And now we're going to do Frederick, and then go tab, and he's 789, and we'll make him from 789 Boulevard, and he's from the UK. So now we kind of have a little bit of data entry here, but you see that you want to figure out the pattern that's going to be in the kind of data series, and then go tab, enter, tab, enter. However, you need to manipulate yourself or get around the cells. And next, let's just do a little bit of cleanup. So kind of apply some of the things we've talked about so far. So you notice that these cells are kind of cutting each other off. So why don't we go ahead and select all of the information, and you can do this with Shift Control right down, but we'll go up and center everything first, and then because this stuff's getting cut off a little bit, let's go up and press this kind of double arrow thing to get each row lined up properly. So now it's looking a lot better, and it's worth noting that because this is kind of the header, we want it to be bigger. So let's go ahead and hold down Shift and then go Control right. Now we've got the header selected, and let's bold it, which you can do Control B or hit the button, and then we're going to raise the size of the font to 12. Now we should probably give it a title, and we'll call it Address Book, right? But we really want this to be centered, and the way you center something in Excel is by what's called merging cells. So these cells, F3, G3, G3, and H3, we're going to merge them together using the merge and center, which is under Home. And the way you do that is you go Control C, and then Shift right. Now we have the area selected, and you go merge and center. And now you've probably seen this in some spreadsheets before. now you have the title, and the title should probably be even bigger than the rest of the table. So we're going to go and hit bold, and then up the size to 14. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just select these columns really quick and get them spaced out properly, but to make it so you can see this table separately from the rest of the sheet, I'm going to go ahead and select the header, and give it an outside border. And you do that by going over to borders here, and we're going to select just outside borders. Now, we're going to select the actual address entries, and we're going to go Shift Control right down and do the same thing. And because we've already selected that border style, if you just press the button, you have it. Now, as a last thing, let's make the top part a little bit easier to see, and we're going to go ahead and select this area, and then press the paint bucket. And we want to make it actually red, so we're going to press red, and now we have a little mini address book. So, now that we've kind of done a little mini example, I'm going to go ahead and open up the practice tab, which is a little thing I put together, and this is kind of a movie collection, and I'm just going to walk through how you would go about using this, and then we're going to kind of formatting it better, and then we're going to alphabetize it at the end. So, and while we're at it, we'll change the runtime to hours. So, as you can see, things are kind of cutting each other off a little bit, so we're going to select, or these cells are getting cut off a little bit, so we're going to select D through H, and then we're going to press the double arrow button by kind of selecting the line in between the columns, and boom, now everything's looking a little bit more spread out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go Shift Control right down to select everything, and then we're going to put everything center, so it's looking a little better still. Now, we probably want to give this a title so that it's easy to tell, that this is a movie collection. So we'll go up to D1 and we're going to type in My Movie Collection and hit enter. And because we want the title to be centered, what we're going to do is we're going to use merge and center, but not quite yet. I said earlier that we're going to want to add the runtime in hours, and to do that we're going to need to make use of an equation. So we're going to need to add another column. So I'm going to go over here to I2 and I'm going to type in runtime and then in parentheses hours, and I'll just abbreviate it HRS. And so because we already have the runtime in minutes, we're going to go ahead and use a formula. And so the way you use a formula is you go and press equals, and then how do you convert from minutes to hours? There's 60 minutes in an hour, so the runtime in hours is going to be the runtime in minutes divided by 60. So we're going to select this cell, and then we're going to go divided by, which you use the slash to do that, and then type in 60. So now we have the equation for the time in hours of each movie. So if you press F2, you can see it. And because they all use the same equation and the format is set up so that we can do this, we're going to go and do Control C to copy the formula, and then we're going to hold down Shift and go down, 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 down. I don't know the exact number, but until the last entry, and then press Control V. So now we have the runtime in hours for each of these movies. But it doesn't look very pretty because we don't need to know how many decimal points there are exactly, because we just want to know roughly how long each movie is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to, while this is still selected, we're going to get rid of a lot of the decimal points. And you do that by going up to the number, and we're going to go decrease decimal and click that until we have, let's say, 2, because that's a pretty good amount of decimals. And so now what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and center this, and we'll go ahead and select the entire column. So go up to I2 and go Shift Control down, and then we're going to go over and select align center. But you'll notice that even though it says align center, the numbers are to the right. And the way you get around this is by pressing align left and then align center. So now that that's done, you're going to notice that the runtime title is not really visible. So we'll get around this by holding down the I column up top, selecting it, and then pressing the double arrow again. So now we have the table, and it's really starting to come together. And because we're not going to add any more columns to it, we can go ahead and merge and center and get the title right in the center of the whole thing. So you go Control C on the My Movie Collection, or whatever you want to call it, and then you hold down Shift and go all the way to the right. Now that this is done, you can go up to the Home tab and the Merge and Center, and you get the title right in the center. Now that this is now that we're there and the data is all set up and it's easy to read, we can go in and we can kind of start making it look pretty. So because the My Movie Collection is the title, we're going to make it a little bit bigger. We're going to go up to the font and we're going to select, let's say 14. Then these headers, because they're also a little more important than each individual movie, we're going to go ahead and select it. And you can do that by going to D2 and then go Shift Control right. And we're going to go up and select just, let's say 12. So it's a little bigger but not too big. And release year is getting a little cramped, so I'm going to do the double arrow again between E and F. And now it's really starting to look like a table. So let's go ahead and add some colors to it too. So we're going to select My Movie Collection and then go Shift and then go down. And we're going to make this, let's say, nice green. Now lastly, to kind of really put it all together, we're going to go ahead and give it a border. And you do that by selecting the kind of top green part. So you go to the My Movie Collection, then go Shift down, and then you select border. And then you select the movies themselves and you go Shift right down, and then you go select border again. And now we have a nice little movie table. But we're not quite done, and the reason is because the movies are not in alphabetical order, which makes them kind of hard to use. And one of the nice things about Excel is when you have your data set up properly, like how it is here, you can go in and you can actually rearrange data entries by alphabetical title. And you can rearrange them by number as well for like the release year and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to do by movie title just because that's probably the most realistic way that you would do it, that you would organize these movies. So what you're going to do is you need to select the movies, and what you do is you go to D3, and the movie titles rather, sorry, and you go Shift Control down, and this is where the right key functionality is kind of important, and this is an example of why you use it. So you go and hit right click, and it's going to give you the option to sort, and we want to sort A to Z with A being at the top, Z being at the bottom, and when we hit that, it's not working. Oh, sorry. So with the sort warning, it's going to ask you if you want to expand the selection, and you should hit yes. And because what it does is, if you only did with the current selection, it would just alphabetize these names, and it wouldn't move the rest of this around, and then you would have everything out of order. Where Avengers would be in the first row, and it would say that it was made by Steven Spielberg, which isn't right. So you're going to go ahead and hit sort, and now we have it set up where everything is alphabetized, and you can check. So, Jaws is still with Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park is still with Steven Spielberg, Bug's Life is with John Lasseter. All the data has moved. And now, just to show you really quick, finally, if you wanted to look at the data and see your movie collection in terms of what was released most recently, you would go over to like release year, select E3, and then go Shift Control down and right click, and then go to sort, and then let's go largest to smallest, because the largest year is going to be the most recent. And so we're going to get the same expand selection or not, and we're going to hit expand. We're going to select that and hit sort. And now you can see the movies from oldest to newest. Or sorry, from newest to oldest rather. So that was the first lesson in the series. I hope that you found it useful. I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and comment below if you have any questions, or if you have any things you're working on at your work that you want to figure out how to do. I'm more than happy to try to help you out. And until the next lesson, good luck and have fun using Excel.